Hello and welcome to the show that gives you an insight into the most important issues of the day. You're watching The Big Picture. Thousands of Egyptians filled the historic Tahrir Square yesterday and today after the nation's military rulers officially recognized Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood as the winner of Egypt's first competitive presidential elections, handing the Islamists a much anticipated and potent triumph. The 60-year-old Morsi is an American-trained engineer who becomes the first Islamist head of a state of an Arab country and the first Egyptian president who doesn't have a military background. But even as pro-democracy sentiments are on the rise after Morsi made a very statesman-like acceptance speech, the larger standoff between the country's powerful military and the victorious Muslim Brotherhood on the future constitution and government institutions is still unresolved. The Muslim Brotherhood, an organization that has struggled for over 84 years as a secret society operating in and out of the shadows, has finally won power in a country ruled by dictators and monarchs till now. Mr. Morsi's designation as president-elect will hand the Brotherhood and its more secular and liberal allies an important voice in their struggle for power with the military, and the new president is all set to become the chief figure negotiating with the generals on behalf of both the group and its allies. Tonight on The Big Picture, we discuss the changing political reality of Egypt, the path ahead for democracy in that country, and we'll also discuss the role of the Muslim Brotherhood and what role they will play in Egypt's policy towards the rest of the world, especially the United States. And joining me in the studio is A.K. Ramakrishnan from JNU. Also joining us on the program is Kamar Agha, expert on international affairs. Romesh Bhandari, former Foreign Secretary, will join us in just a bit, as well as Shohrat Aref, who works for Middle Eastern News Agency, will also join us in a bit. On the phone with us tonight will be WSH Awwad, South Asia Bureau Chief of the Arabiya channel. But I'd like to start the show with Mr. Bhandari, if I could. Mr. Bhandari, the first and most interesting piece of news that came out of this victory or acceptance speech, whatever you want to call it, on Sunday, was the statement that minorities need not fear the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi will be the president for all Egyptian, not just the Muslims living there. That's a very statesman-like approach, wouldn't you say? You think that will fly with the rank and file of the Muslim Brotherhood per se, which in the past has expressed its wish to make Egypt an Islamic country?
No, I think this is a change which is taking place in the thinking of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, there's always one thing when you are in the opposition or you're leading an agitation and you take rigid positions. But it becomes something else when you get the reins of power in your hands and face the realities of the country that you are to govern. Now, the country, the government in Cairo has to be reflective and take care of all the constituents of the population. And in Egypt, there is a large number of non-Muslims also there who are well-to-do, influential. They have to be pacified. So you can't have a really fundamentalist regime there. And I'm very happy that this is happening, because Egypt being the most populous country in the Arab world, what happens in Egypt certainly has an impact on the other Arabs and what goes on there.
Right, Mr.
And
Bhandari.
I think it's another step forward towards democracy.
Right. Mr. Bhandari, stay with us. A very pertinent point you raised there about what happens in Egypt. It will also affect the Arab world as well. Let me come to Professor Kamar Agha for a bit. Stay with us, Mr. Bhandari. We'll come back to you. Now, just days, Mr. Agha, before the elections, the military disbanded the parliament and stripped the extent of power that the incoming president would have in an effort to sort of undermine the authority of the incoming president. How do you see Mohammed Morsi handling that? That is something he will not be okay with.
You know, he has hardly any power at the moment, you know. He's expected to get, you know, his power lies in parliament, you know, which is...
The parliament is disbanded.
Disbanded, you know. So that is a major problem, you know. Then other thing, you know, he has compromised with the brotherhood agenda. On the other hand, will he be, you know, able to accommodate his rank and file, which are equally, you know, who are very, you know, they want to implement the brotherhood's agenda, you know. Then there are Salafists within the, you know, his alliance partner, you know, who wants to, they're very extremist group, you know. So these are the things, you know, he has tremendous challenges. Army is not willing to share power. Then the pressure is coming from the secularists as well, you know, who are not comfortable neither with the brotherhood nor with the army. They wanted to establish a liberal, secular, democratic setup like India. They have mentioned, where religion and secularism can go side by side.
So you're saying it's difficult days ahead for
very
Mohammed
difficult
Morsi.
for the President Morsi to handle this situation.
And the Muslim Brotherhood as well.
And the Brotherhood as well.
Right, right. Let me come to A.K. Ramakrishnan on the issue of the military now. Mr. Bhandari as well as Professor Aga mentioned the military and how they would respond. Let me get your opinion on this. The larger issue of a standoff with the military is still not resolved. Now, Tantawi, who's the military ruler, has come out and congratulated him, saying that this is a good development for the country. But do you see them handing over the running of the country, the day-to-day running of the country and the powers to a democratically elected government so easily, or do you think they'll make them run around for a bit?
It will not be a very easy process, but they've been toying with very many ideas, tried to curtail whatever gains the movement have until now achieved by obeying the order, the court order, as they say, to dissolve the parliament, give a much more, diluted punishment for Mubarak and so on. And therefore, the military was trying everything, because the military is so well entrenched in Egyptian politics and economy. It's a kind of deep state within Egypt, and therefore they will not leave their economic and political might so easily. But they are also under tremendous pressure from the popular will, that is,
and the revolution itself.
And the revolution itself, and therefore have to adjust with changing circumstances.
Right. I want to get an Arab perspective on this. Waeel Awwad has joined us on the phone line. Thank you, Mr. Awwad, for joining us. First of all, let me just quickly fire 3 points towards you and get an answer for you from you. The Justice Ministry has given soldiers the right to arrest civilians as well. The Supreme Council of Armed Forces gave themselves legislative powers and reinforced the role in the drafting of a permanent constitution. Field Marshal Tantawi announced the re-establishment of a National Defense Council, putting the generals in charge of Egypt's national policy. Are we looking, Mr. Awwad, are we looking at a potential lame duck president, or do you see Morsi and the Brotherhood convincing the military establishment to let the government run the country? Do you think that's a possibility at all?
I think that is a possibility. There are many scenarios as floated now currently. Like, we look at the scenario, maybe tomorrow they strike the deal between the army and the Muslim Brotherhood for ruling the country, so they will keep the other forces, the nationalist and the democratic forces, out of power. Because you must remember that Egypt has always run by the military, and it has own interest in the economy, and they have played a major role in the government in the shade, even during the Hosni Mubarak time. They have been having most influential all in the economy, the infrastructure, and everything in every part of the country. And they only left that to the Muslim Brotherhood to fill up the vacuum of taking care of the low socio-economic group of Egypt. And that's why you have now two forces in the region. There may be a scenario of these two joining hands. The other scenario could be a confrontation between the army and the Muslim Brotherhood, taking in consideration the amount of arms has been smuggled. Ever since they have won for election, we can see smuggling of arms coming from Libya, coming from Turkey, coming from China, coming from neighboring country. It is a kind of a chaos they are trying to set up in Egypt. It is a kind of an internal strife, an internal rift between the Muslim Brotherhood and the other forces and the military that we have to show down there.
Mr. Awwad, one more quick question if I could get to you. I know you're a busy man and you have to leave. One more quick question from my side. One very interesting point that came out immediately after it was announced that he had won the polls was that his statement saying that he would try and strengthen relationships with Iran. Egypt's-Iran relationship should be strengthened to create a strategic balance of power in the region. Now, Israel, of course, immediately objected to that, and then Morsi's office retracted that statement. Do you think, as a potential incoming president, he would want stronger relations with Iran, and how would that affect the rest of the region?
I think he wanted to say to the international community that don't worry about the Muslim Brotherhood being in power, though he has grown up under the mullah's cover, but he has trying to give the secular outlook. That is why the name of Baradei is being floating now as the Prime Minister, trying to convince the international community.
Right.
But I think the moment Iran comes in the picture, it is always understood that the Muslim Brotherhood, they had a pact with the American not to disturb the relation between United States and the United States interest and Israel interest, and come there with a treaty with Israel and Egypt. Therefore, they're trying to convince them that we will not disturb this equation. Therefore, speaking on Iran at the stage that the United States is leading a campaign against the Iranian, I think that was out of court, and that is why hurriedly he removed it. That shows that the Muslim Brotherhood will not have the truth, or they are a spineless president who will not be able to run the government as long as also the army have the shadow of making sure that this government doesn't go anyway to the extremes that lead to safeguard Egypt's integrity and sovereignty as well.
Right. Waeel, Awwad, thank you so much for joining us. He made another point, which I just read out, saying we'll maintain all agreements with the world and whatever accords we've signed. Is that a reference directly to Israel saying that, look, we're not here to fight, there is no need for confrontation, and we'll maintain the peace?
Of course, this is in reference to the Israel. I mean, he made it clear, in fact, yesterday night, to CNN, that he will honor all the treaties, including the one with Israel, So he has given the commitment, And in fact, last 4 or 5 days, the discussion was going on between the Brotherhood and the army officers, That's why the election was delayed, So there is a clear-cut understanding between them, between the two. Now, the problem is that there are other problems also, As far as army is concerned, his organization, the Brotherhood, their main concern is modernization or liberal and secular element. They are more concerned about the secularism growth. They want to counter that, that element. As far as army is concerned, the Brotherhood is basically opposed to the democracy, basically opposed to secularism. These are the things which are most important to them. Give a lot of attachment. Not only he, but the other organization. If you look at Pakistan, the other country, they would but still the differences will remain there. On these questions with the army. They would try to develop a Pakistan model. Rather than the Turkish model.
Try and work with the army.
The secular character would be maintained by the army.
Right. Let me put the question to Mr. Professor Ramakrishnan now. He said the same thing. Now, the other one, we referred to Israel in just a bit. The other one, the second one, of course, being interpreted in the context of other West Asian countries. Now, the whole region is in a state of flux right now. There are revolutions going on in Tunisia and in Libya and what have you. Does this mean that Mursi's focus is going to be rebuilding his own country from scratch rather than meddle in the affairs of, say, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Tunisia and the lot?
Egypt has always been at the center of Arab politics, and therefore some lost ground has to be regained, and for that an immediate position on any of the ongoing conflict in a very sharp-edged manner will not be in the good interests of an incumbent president. So he is extremely cautious about what kind of position that Egypt should take, the new Egypt under his presidency should take. But one hint is already there that not only with respect to international commitments within the region, Israel, and then with the United States, the kind of relations they had, even though it will not be of the Mubarak American kind of thing, but it will be a newly arranged thing. There will be a negotiation with the IMF for new loan. There will be privatization in a big manner with the Muslim Brotherhood in power and so on. And therefore, with some way of pushing the Egyptian economy forward, which
that's
is
going to be his focus.
Shambles now, and then concentrate on regaining the position, political position within the Arab world.
I think Egypt would play a major role in Syria. because that is there, because everybody is on board, you know,
Right,
like
right.
the Americans, the Saudis, and the Egyptian
I'd like to come to
government.
that point after the break. We have to take a small break, gentlemen, here, and we'll come back and try to reconnect with Romesh Bhandari as well and ask him about the effect that how the US is going to play out this particular scenario, considering the Muslim Brotherhood has come to power in Egypt. We'll come back after a short break. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back to The Big Picture. We're discussing Mohammad Mursi's elevation to the president post in Egypt. Let me go to Romesh Bhandari very quickly. Sir, my question to you, sir, is the Muslim Brotherhood coming to power in Egypt. What does it mean in the context of US relations with Egypt? Covertly, and some would say overtly as well, Washington has been trying hard to keep the Islamists at bay from becoming a rising political force in Cairo. Now that they're in charge, how will the US play this one out?
See, the American major concern is going to be in regard to the approach of Egypt towards Israel. Now, Egypt had been the moderating influence all this while under Muslim Mubarak, and that had an influence over the rest of the Arab world. Therefore, I think for the Americans, it would be reassuring that Mr. Morsi has said that they will honor all the agreements, which also means the agreement of 1979 with Israel. And that should set them at rest. We should also remember that the Americans have had a very close link with the Egyptian army. I mean, to a large extent, Egypt was almost an ally of the Americans. And therefore, these links with the military in Egypt, and the military in Egypt, please let us not overlook, is still a very powerful force.
Extremely powerful, yes.
It has a big say there. They're lying there and extremely powerful. Yes, I think I stand corrected, an extremely powerful role. You can't write them off. It is too early for them to try and assert themselves, because there would be a reaction in Tahrir Square and all over Egypt. And the people they have to do it in a way where they will have to see that the public reaction does not become negative or adverse. So therefore, this is going to be a job of fine-tuning and treading very carefully by the present regime in Egypt.
Right.
And let me also say that Mr. Morsi was not the first choice of the Muslim Brotherhood. He is very much more of a moderate than another person who was the main man, yeah. I forget his name, right. But who was disqualified over some technicality. Otherwise, he would have been right. the head of the Egyptian right. government now.
Right, Mr.
But Mr. Morsi is US educated and a moderate, yeah.
Right. Let me go to another guest who has just joined us now. We finally have contact with Shohrat. Aref, ma'am, if you can hear me, I'll put you the question I put to my guest earlier. The announcement by Egypt's new president-elect that he would like closer ties with Iran, how do you see that playing out in a scenario where the Arab world is in a state of flux, where revolutions keep happening day in and day out, and of course the fact that Israel is not very happy, even though they've congratulated Mr. Morsi, they must not be very happy that the Muslim Brotherhood has come to power. In that context, how do you see the statement saying that I would like better and stronger relations with Tehran? How do you see that one playing out?
I think this is a good gesture from the new president that he will have a good relations with Iran. Iran is a very important country, and Egyptian people wanted to have a good relations with Iran. India has a good relations with Iran, and we have good relations with Israel. There's no problem to have bilateral good relations with both countries. The same applies to Egypt. We can have good relations with Israel at the same time with Iran. And of what I heard yesterday from the president's new speech, he said, "I'm going to be abided by all international agreements, including the peace pact with Israel." So he's open to all countries. He's open to have both relations with other countries in the region.
Right. Let me put you another question, ma'am, if you can hear me. How do you think the reaction of the army and the military is going to be, and how do you think the people will react? In the days to come, we expect negotiations between the military rulers of Egypt and the new president-elect and the Muslim Brotherhood government that he'll be forming. How do you see any adverse reactions from the public in case the military starts to act tough and doesn't give Morsi and his government the power they deserve? Do you see any adverse reactions to that happening, if at all?
Up to now, it's not clear what will happen in the coming 2-3 days. But of what I read and heard, that now they are holding a meeting between the military council and the new president to see the preparations for the handing over the power to him. Egyptian people are very happy with the new developments happening they are very happy in the streets, and they are optimistic about the future of Egypt. But still, up till now, it's a big challenge for the new president, Mohamed Morsi, how he will form the new government, how he will try to appease all and to make all people happy with his decisions. So we have wait and see now till we have his own forming the new government.
Right, Shohrat. Stay with us. Thank you so much for that answer. Let me come to you, Agha Sahab. You had a point to make before the break while Mr. Ramakrishnan was talking.
No, I was just saying that, you know, the Saudis, the Americans, everybody would like, you know, Egypt to play some role in Syria, where Akhwan-e-Muslimin, Muslim Brotherhood is very active and have a large presence, you know, also engaging the army over there. So that was the thing. They would also like, the Saudi would like to see that the Egyptian to counter Turkish involvement in Syria, you know, because that is the Arab-Turkish rivalries also.
Do you agree with Agha Sahab when you said that?
Yes. Egypt can play such a role, but I think the immediate priorities of a new president would be to address the issue of the economy.
Right.
Yes, I agree with you.
Because that's the most important thing. And immediately he has to appoint a prime minister, a cabinet has to be placed in order, he has to pick and choose people. Whether he can form a national inclusive government or not, pressures are there. He has to address all these issues and have a working relationship with the military, which is controlling major aspects, legislative and other kinds of major powers. And he has to immediately get his act going.
Right.
And he has already, you know, started that work. Is in the presidential palace today. So I think he's moving fast, but we have to wait and see how far he would be allowed to go along those.
He might be in the presidential palace, but it's not really certain where he'll take the oath.
He will, yes, but and then a parliament election has to come forth in the near future, and he has to take some initiative and negotiate very hard with the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces.
Right. Mr. Bhandari, if I could come to you and ask you this. You just heard my other guest saying that the economy should be the focus of the new president. Of course, it most probably will be the focus of the new president there. Apart from dealing with the military and the transition of power, what, in your opinion, Mr. Bhandari, will be the biggest challenges that Mohamed Morsi will face in the days to come?
Well, if he has to face an economic crisis or an adverse economic situation in Egypt, he has to look towards the West. He has to look to the IMF, and he has to look to America. That is why I did say that the Americans will have a very major role to play in Egypt. They will continue to do that. They'll have to probably change their ways and their methods, because earlier there was a direct relationship with Sadat, and after Sadat with Hosni Mubarak, and that went on very well. They were able to contain everything in the Middle East. But what will be satisfying is the statements in regard to honoring all international commitments. The aspect in regard to their relations with with Iran. Now, I'm not quite knowledgeable about exactly what happened because certain statements were made. They talked about improving relations with Iran and then promptly changed that,
right.
Or withdrew that statement. Now, if that is so, then that would show that there has been a very clear intervention by the Americans.
Right, right.
Because that is not something that they would like to see in the Middle East.
Right,
it would very negatively impact what Americans are planning as far as Iran is concerned.
Right, sir. One last question, if I could get a brief reaction from Shohrat, get an Arab perspective to close the show. Like Mr. Bhandari and my other guest said, Shohrat, he'll have to look westwards if he wants to rebuild his economy, probably look towards the IMF and the World Bank to get in the funds needed to rebuild that country. Do you think he'll be as eager to go and look westwards like my guests have pointed out, or you think he'll have reservations about that given the fact that the US and the IMF and the pro-Western powers are not really popular right now in Egypt?
I think Egypt will have changed its new policy. We're going to look eastward. I think Egypt is now looking forward to both relations with India, with China, with Russia. We want to have bilateral ties with all countries, not only to focus on United States or EU like at the time of Mubarak's regime.
Right.
So we're not going to depend mainly on US. This is not our, I think it's not our policy in the coming future.
Right. Thank you so much, Shohrat, for that. I must thank all my guests before I sign off. Kamaraga, A.K. Ramakrishnan, Romesh Bhandari, thank you so much for joining us. Shohrat, Aref also, as well as Waeel Awwad, who joined us on the phone line. Of course, like Shohrat just said, it's not just that they might want to look westward. There is a look east policy on the table as well. Perhaps that option could be explored as well. That's all the time we have from The Big Picture tonight. Till next time when we get you another edition of The Big Picture with another eminent panel, another hot issue, it's Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.